Today's video is part 2 for Daniel Larimer, and we are outside of Starbucks, so that's fun. If anyone's interested in optimizing their Starbucks drink, so this is what I get. It's a venti shaken iced espresso. I used to get a latte of some kind. I would get a venti and I would add an additional shot because the grande and the venti both have 2 shots of espresso, and I didn't know that until later. I'm like, well, it's just extra milk. But if you get a venti ice shaken espresso, you get 4 shots of espresso. Straight up, you don't have to pay extra. So 4 shots of espresso for $5 if you get the venti ice shaken espresso, regular, not the oat milk. But what happens with me, at least, is that I also get 2 pumps of pistachio sauce, and now I get the lavender cold foam, so we're back at like $7.50 instead of $5. So you get 4 shots of espresso. Yeah. So part 2, Daniel Larimer. It's talking about fuzzy definitions. You talk about that in one of your past videos, and I want to talk about fuzzy definitions also, and the law of Moses, and the Sabbath, and Elijah, John the Baptist. And all this has to do with some blind spots that I think you might have, because in one of your videos you're like, we need to be on the lookout and not be given over to cognitive bias, and be humble and be open to having our views checked and validated and corrected. Also, as a preface, I am terrified to say these things to you. Not because of anything I've observed in you, but because of my past experience regarding how I was treated when I believed a man was in error, and I sought to love them by blessing them with the truth. And here is a quote, James 5. I haven't observed evidence that would lead me to believe you are a man of war, anger, and violence, but the caution is still there. When I was watching your videos and I saw these things where I think you might have blind spots, and I was thinking of how to present them, it's like my mind, it's like this overabundance of like qualifiers. How do I package this in a way where it's like I don't provoke someone to anger? And it's I've been around a lot of angry men who are very sensitive, and they have fragile egos, and they're easily provoked, and they're ruled by their emotions, and they're not very reasonable, like mentally, not very logical. So I haven't observed evidence in you where I think you're one of those guys, but the terror is still there, and the fear is still there. But I don't think, I think the men that are that way, they're mostly religious leaders, and it's like their position of authority is based off of their intellect. So it's like because they know so much, well, that gives them the ability to have this position. It's not based off of like spiritual maturity, discerning good and evil. It's not based off of being a good example. It's just based off of knowing a lot or being intelligent. So when they perceive someone to, it's like in order to keep their position, well, they have to be the most intelligent person. They won't say that out loud, but that's the case. So when they see someone who's a threat, or they're intimidated, it's like envy and jealousy provokes them to like murder and violence, forms of murder, forms of violence, and their anger and their hatred. And that leads to, and when it's like an intellectual thing, well, that's, now you have like this psychological war, and they want to destroy your mind. So, but with you, I don't think you're like that. I haven't observed, I don't really know you. So, and like I know you're into the scriptures, but this isn't your main thing, and you get your money, like you're the crypto king already. So it's like you already have this established kingdom outside of pursuing the Lord. It's not like this knowledge is your kingdom, or it's not like you need this to get like validation or respect from other people. That was the same thing with me. Like I was an engineer, and then I got converted, so it's not like I needed religious intellectualism to be like validated. And I didn't have any hopes of being a teacher, being a woman, so it's like I pursued this stuff because I love God. And I think so this is a quote from Google Books about your book, where you made it your life mission to create free market, voluntary solutions for securing life, liberty, property, and justice for all. So I think because you have the right motive with how you use your mind, that's why God is blessing you, because you're using your mind to actually serve man, and you're not selfishly ambitious to some extent. That's why it's like when you set your mind to do the will of God, it's like he'll give you the resources needed. So because of this, I think it's not like war for you, and you're open to reason and think these things through. It's not you're already a millionaire, you're the crypto king, so it's not like if someone tells you you're wrong about your view on eating pork, it's like I don't know what it's like to be a man. Yeah, so like here in Ecclesiastes, I have seen that every labor and every skill which is done is the result of rivalry between a man and his neighbor. This too is vanity and striving after the wind. I don't think you're looking to be the best. I think you're just looking to do what you're good at and to help people. So I think that's why God has blessed your mind with your crypto ventures, and I think that's why he's blessing you with your pursuit of the scriptures. You're studying them for yourself, and you're making videos, and you're offering it for free for anyone that wants to partake, that it might help them also. Yep, so I think you're a good guy. So fuzzy definitions, I want to talk about the term perfect and how it's used in the Bible, and also the term faith. And here you talk about the word righteousness. So with the word perfect, and here you had it in your video where you were responding to like criticisms, I guess, and people said like, he thinks he's perfect. I don't think people know what I think what people think of when they think of perfection is not God's standard of what perfection is. So we should have our definition of perfect in alignment with who God is and how he's used it in his Bible, in his word. And the standard that, what's God's standard of perfection? And is that man's standard of perfection? Is man's standard higher than God's standard? So here in Matthew 5, it talks about the works that you are to do in order to be sons of your Father who is in heaven. And it talks about who the Father is and his works. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. So God provides the resources needed for life to both. He's not partial. He distributes resources because they need it, and because he's a creator and he upholds his creation. And it's offered, physical resources and spiritual resources. He offers them to both. So, the works of God in creation, he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rains on the righteous and the unrighteous. And then at the end, therefore, you are to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. So, this is what it means to be perfect. It means you're good and kind to all men. It's your kindness, your goodness, your graciousness, it's a result of who you are. It's not a result of the recipient. When you're kind to all. When you're good to all. Your character and your conduct and your works isn't, it's a result of who you are. It's not a result of the recipient. So if you're a kind person, well, you're also kind to evil and ungrateful men. And kind, it's like that Hesed, like faithful, loving kindness. Kindness, mercy, graciousness, love, it's, you're just, you're giving to those who need it, and it's without conditions. That's what perfect is. I'm giving you this because you need it, not because of anything in you. It's unconditional. It's of myself. So that's what it is to be perfect. Also, faith. I didn't have a right understanding of faith for a very long time. I had faith. I just didn't know the term or use it appropriately. So faith is like the element of eyesight into like spiritual things. It's being able to like see the unseen. It's like wisdom and insight into the spiritual realm and seeing God and seeing the works of God. And God is invisible. No one has seen him at any time. So it's like through the eyes of faith, you can perceive God spiritually by his word, his works in creation, through Jesus. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So here in Hebrews 11, 1 through 3, so, by faith we understand that the worlds were set in order at God's command, so that the visible has its origin in the invisible. So like creation, all of visible creation came forth from the invisible God. He spoke it. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So it's like by looking at visible physical creation, we can make reasonable deductions and know who God is. God created these things. So it's like all of these things can tell us about the source that they came from, like through the eyes of faith. And then Hebrews 11 talks about, by faith, how Moses endured as seeing him who is unseen. And then in Acts 14, it talks about how Barnabas and Paul, when they were sent out as apostles from the church of Antioch, how they came and through that work, at the end, Acts 14:27, they began to report things that God had done with them and how God, had opened a door of faith to the Gentiles. So what's this door of faith? And it's in like Acts 14 through 17. And this is what Barnabas preached when he saw that they were going to make sacrifices to them. And he preaches God from creation. Because these Gentiles are different from the Gentiles in Acts 10 that Peter spoke to. It's like they already had knowledge of the Word of God and they had knowledge of Jesus and his works. These Gentiles didn't witness those things. They didn't know those things. So Barnabas preaches God from creation, calling them to turn to a living God who made the heaven, the earth, and the sea, and all that is in them. Generations gone by, he permitted all the nations to go their own way, and yet he did not leave himself without a witness, in that he did good and gave you rains from heaven and fruitful seasons, satisfying your hearts with food and gladness. So Barnabas comes and he's preaching God from creation to the Gentiles, and this is like the door of faith. They're able to see God through the witness that he's given in creation, that they've tasted and they've experienced and they've felt. It's like, oh, this is who God is. We can see God and we can imitate. Like these are the works that God is doing. These are the works that we are to do. Yeah, and then like faith without works is dead. So it's like if you can perceive the works of God, well, we are to imitate that. And they're summarized by doing good. He's the living God, imparting life to everyone. wanting to heal, wanting to restore, wanting to mend. Yep. Also, that part of about Moses leaving Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king. I love comparing Jesus and Moses. So Jesus is a prophet like Moses. So like this passage in Hebrews where I think the author to the book of Hebrews might be Luke. So by faith he left Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king. So here in Luke, this is Jesus is doing that same work. This is him when he's leaving, verses 31 through 33. Just at that time, some Pharisees approached, saying to him, "Go away, leave here, for Herod wants to kill you." And he said to them, "Go and tell that fox, behold, I cast out demons and perform cures today and tomorrow, and the third day I reach my goal. Nevertheless, I must journey on today and tomorrow and the next day, for it cannot be that a prophet would perish outside of Jerusalem." So it's like they want him, they're warning him to leave because Herod wants to kill him. Jesus has to leave anyways, but he wants them to know, like, hey, I'm going to leave, but it's not because I fear Herod. Like, go and tell that fox, behold, I cast out demons and perform cures today. Like, I'm leaving, but it's not because I fear, like, your intimidation or, like, your death threats or your violence. Yeah, so it's kind of like he's like Moses in that. He left Egypt not fearing the wrath of the king. So it's like here he's leaving Egypt, the Jews, the Pharisees, the spiritual Egypt, and he's leaving, but it's not because he fears the wrath of the king. It's not because he fears the wrath of Herod. And then in here I have, in this video, I talk more about the similarities between Moses and Jesus, those two prophets. Jesus is more than a prophet. Like they both saw God's form and they both heard God's voice. So they're able to mediate between God and man. And it's like Moses came and he gave the law. And it's like that law can, if Moses is trying to bring the Israelites to God, and these are the laws that he spoke in order to do that, well, that could say more about the Israelites than it does about God. And like with Jesus, you know, when he came and he it's like his sayings are a lot more simplified. Treat others the way you want to be treated. When he, you know, decrees the laws of God. So that plays into my next point about the law of Moses. But yeah, that point I kind of explained better in that video. So the law of Moses. So here in Acts 15 is Jerusalem Council when people come out of Jerusalem saying, you can't be saved unless you're circumcised. So then they send people up to Jerusalem to get clarification on this. Verse 5, some of the sect of the Pharisees who had believed stood up saying, "It is necessary to circumcise them and to direct them to observe the law of Moses. These two things are necessary for the Gentiles in order to be saved." And then verse 10, this is either Peter or James. "Now therefore, why do you put God to the test by placing upon the neck of the disciples a yoke which neither our fathers nor we have been able to bear?" This burden, this yoke is like the law. You're burdening them with the law of Moses. We weren't able to fulfill it. Our fathers weren't able to fulfill it. Why are we testing God by putting this burden on the Gentiles that we weren't able to bear? Like wisdom from above, it's without hypocrisy. We haven't been able to bear it. Why are we going to test God and put it on them? And then at the end, "For it seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to us to lay upon you no greater burden than these essentials, that you abstain from things sacrificed to idols, from blood, and from things strangled, and from fornication. If you keep yourself free from such things, you will do well. Farewell." And then James at the end, this is Acts 21. when Elder James is talking to Paul. They have been told about you that you are teaching all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children, nor walk according to the customs. Like Paul is telling this to the Jews in a mixed assembly, the Jews who are among the Gentiles, that they're to forsake Moses and not circumcise their children, nor walk according to the customs. And all will know that there is nothing. He tells him to go purify himself with the people, shave his head. Told about you, but that you yourself also walk orderly, keeping the law. But concerning the Gentiles who have believed, we wrote, having decided that they should abstain from meat sacrificed to idols and from blood and from what is strangled and from fornication. So I'm a Gentile. I don't know your background historically. I don't think you're a Jew, but I don't think Gentiles are required to observe the law of Moses and the customs. There are moral ethics in the law of Moses that are continued in the sayings of Jesus. So yeah. And then here's more of Hebrews about the law of Moses. So, like Hebrews 1, God, after he spoke long ago to the fathers and the prophets in many portions and in many ways, in these last days has spoken to us in his Son. He is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature. Basically, it's like from the argument from the greatest to the least, like if Jesus is greater than Moses, then adherence to the commandments of Jesus, you're kind of covered. It's not like, you have to obey both. If Jesus is a greater mediator, well, conformity to Jesus and imitating Jesus, it's like, well, he's greater than Moses. So if I obey Jesus, well, he was faithful as a son, not as, greater than that of a servant. So it's because Jesus is greater, his position, his authority, his role. You don't have to obey Moses and then obey Jesus. You could just obey the great one, the greatest, and then you're kind of covered. Consider Jesus the apostle and high priest of our confession. Moses was faithful in all his house as a servant, but Christ was faithful as a son over his house. Let us run with endurance the race set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. And then also, like another minor point, I think explicitly in Acts, the Gentiles are not to, that burden of keeping the law, observing the law of Moses isn't to be placed on the Gentiles. I think that's like all that's really needed to kind of prove my point. And then like these other two things are kind of like minor points. So if you disagree with like this one and the one before, I don't think that like disproves my point. I think the first one is like kind of all that's needed. But at the Mount of Transfiguration, when you have Jesus, Moses, and Elijah, and then they hear a voice from the cloud saying, "This is my son, my chosen one, listen to him." And then they different variations, but after that, it's like they see Jesus alone. So it's like God is testifying, "This is my son, listen to him." And after that prophetic utterance, it's like Jesus is alone. So I think if you solely fix your eyes on Jesus, you'll be good. Yep. Also, in one of your videos, you talk about the Sabbath, and you mentioned like a lunar Sabbath. So in regards to that, I'm in. I'm already on board for a transition to observing the lunar calendar. So I'm in with transitioning to a lunar Sabbath. I'm just not sure exactly how that works. So I have this moon phase calendar. I'm assuming that with the new moon, that is the one, that marks the one. Does it start at the Lunar New Year? That's the one. And then you have patterns of 7. Like, is it the first day or is it the last in a series of 7? I would say it's like the first day of the week. I just don't know when that week starts. So I'm curious, like with the lunar Sabbath, like how would you mark that day? What is it? Like the beginning of the Lunar New Year, the new moon, is that the one? Would that be the Sabbath, and then every 7 days after that, or is it like every new moon is the one of the Sabbath, the first day of the week? Also, I'm curious with like, from your perspective, like what in your mind, what is it to observe the Sabbath if it's not working at all, or like working secularly? What is to be abstained from and what is to be performed on the Sabbath? I have an interview on Tuesday, so if it's like not working secularly on the Sabbath is part of observance, I want to let them know that I'm going to need this religious exemption. I think they'll be okay with it. I'll probably maybe have to use vacation or something like that. But I have an interview on Tuesday, so I would like to make this known to them that I would need certain days off. And I'm not being sarcastic. I'm all in on a lunar Sabbath and like abstaining from work if that's going to be the customs. What would we call this sect? But I'll do it. I could be on board with that. Yep. And then with the prophet Elijah, so I'll keep an eye out. I'll let you know if I see anything, but also let's make sure we're faithful to what he has already revealed. You know, at his, I don't know if this would be considered Elijah's second coming, if he came first in, I don't know what books he's in, and then like John the Baptist is like the second coming of Elijah, and that he's in like the spirit and power of Elijah, and then when he comes again, that's like the third coming of Elijah. But so I don't know if this is his first coming or his third coming, but let's make sure we're faithful to what he has already revealed. If we're not faithful to past revelation, what are we going to do with new revelation? So I have this video that I posted 6 months ago, Needed Reminders from John the Baptist. It talks about his commandments and instruction that he gives. So we should make sure that we're following that. And it kind of ties into, this is another video I did. It's about like Acts 14, about he did good, and it talks about the works of God in creation, and it kind of expounds on that verse that Barnabas preaches. There was one guy I thought for sure was John the Baptist. So here on the left, that's Matthew Borgstrom. When I was in his congregation, I thought for sure he was John the Baptist. I told it to his face. I was like, you're John the Baptist. You're going to be the prophet Elijah. You'd have to talk to the people that were with me during that season of my life. There's a funny story with Brian Miles that I had. It basically had to do, so his church, the building for his congregation, the road that it's off of is Holy Land Way. But you can't see it. It's like when I had my GPS, it's like when I was turning in, it's like it's like, this is Holy Land Way. And I was like already in my like charismatic era at that time, where it's like, I already thought he was going to be like John the Baptist. And I'm like, just waiting, like every Sunday, waiting for like crazy stuff to start to go down. So the building that they meet in is off of Holy Land Way. And I was talking to Brian Miles. I'm like, Brian, there's all these, like, it's Holy Land Way. What? He's like, well, that's just because of the temple that was torn down. So I'm like, Brian, they destroyed the temple? So it's it's off of like where they meet is off of like I Drive in Orlando, and that's where they had the Holy Land experience, and they used to have this temple. I have never gone, but apparently that temple was torn down for a hospital, and that's why the road is called Holy Land Way. So I thought for sure that this man was going to be Elijah, John the Baptist. And his preaching, it was really good preaching. After being amidst congregations with religious leaders who weren't qualified, and there was a lot of bickering about like, oh, he's qualified, he's not qualified, and at the end of the day, it's like you either have the Spirit or you don't. That's what qualifies someone. So after him, after all of those like other people, when I got to him, it's like, oh, this is like actually, this man actually has the Spirit. I don't think he does, but that was like another reason why I thought he was going to be like John the Baptist or Elijah. But he has this really good sermon on simony. This is on Vimeo. I don't know why they don't use YouTube. He talks about Simon the sorcerer. Another good sermon that I like, again, Tim, I think he has some work he needs to do, but his teaching is really good sometimes. So he has this sermon, The Bold Ministry of John the Baptist, and I think I enjoyed that sermon as well on John the Baptist. So just kind of, on the lookout for those figures. I thought it was going to be Matthew Borgstrom. I don't think it is. Also, there's this video from Pitch Perfect where they're singing I've Got the Magic in Me, and it just reminds me of John the Baptist and Jesus, so I have a video on that. So if you like John the Baptist and Jesus, I think that's kind of cool. And then I talk more about sorcery, magicians, witches, and warlocks. Yeah. So with the death of John the Baptist, sometimes I think of this account and I wonder like who's guilty, the girl, the mom, or Herod. Like who's guilty for the death of John the Baptist? I don't think the girl is. But like what portion of guilt does each person have? But like with Herod, in regards to this oath, because of his oaths, he ends up executing John the Baptist. Like if you look at what she asks, he swore to her, whatever you ask of me, I will give it to you, up to half my kingdom. So that was like the oath that he gave. And then what the girl said, I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter. So like John the Baptist was part of the kingdom of God. It wasn't the kingdom of Herod. So like there are many ways that Herod could have like gotten out of this oath. Like he didn't have to fulfill it, and there's like a lot of loopholes if he wanted to get out. Like she even said, I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist. Well, there's also like a time constriction in that. I want you to do this at once. So once that moment passed, it's like, well, he wasn't able to fulfill that. So it's John the Baptist is not of his kingdom. It's not his to give. And, the time constraint, what the girl is asking for, he's like physically unable to do. So I think he could have gotten out of it in many different ways. And here's more on like John being from the kingdom of heaven instead of like the kingdom of the earth, the kingdom of men. He asks the baptism of John was from what source? From heaven or from men? From heaven. It was the kingdom of heaven. So it wasn't part of Herod's kingdom. Herod's kingdom was from man, not from heaven. And John the Baptist was part of the kingdom of heaven. So it wasn't his to give. And then like here later in Matthew 20, It's when the mother of the sons of Zebedee make a request to Jesus, and she wants him to give her something, and he's like, well, that's not mine to give. It's above my pay grade. So, like, Herod could have gotten out of that oath if he wanted to. And I think specifically because she says the head of John the Baptist instead of, like, the head of John. Like John the Baptist, it talks about his baptism, his teaching, his... like, that was of God. So if she had said John, well, that's talking about, like, the man John, but John the Baptist, well, now you're bringing in his works of baptism. So when you bring in his works, you bring in the Spirit in which enabled him to perform these works, to speak these words from God. So at that point, you're bringing in, like, the kingdom of heaven. So he could have gotten out of it. This is also why I like the Gospel of Luke. So these are the words of John the Baptist. So, like, when, like, Jesus was recognized because of his works and his words. The works that he performed were in accord with Scripture. He fulfilled it, and it's the same thing with John the Baptist. That's like why in Luke at the beginning, in Luke 4, when he says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me to do these things, well, throughout the book of Luke, it's like those are the works that he performed. So it's like Jesus is setting up a signpost, like, remember these things, these are the works that the Messiah is going to do. And then it's like throughout the book of Luke, he performs those works. So it's like, oh yeah, this is what the Messiah is going to do. This is what Jesus just did. They're able to worship in spirit and truth. So the same thing happens with John. So here, this is Malachi chapter 3 and chapter 4, talking about, what John, the prophet Elijah, the one coming in the spirit and power of Elijah, John the Baptist, what they're going to do. So I will be a swift witness against the sorcerers and against the adulterers and against those who swear falsely. And like later, John the Baptist says, don't accuse anyone falsely. Against those who oppress the wage earners, his wages. And then John the Baptist, collect no more than what you have been ordered to. Do not take money from anyone by force. The orphan and the widow. The man who has 2 tunics is to share with him who has none, and he who has food is to do likewise. So it's like you're to provide, you're to protect, you're to cover, you're to feed. You're to be a husband and a father to those who don't have one. Don't oppress the widow and the orphan. But you say, how shall we return? And then they asked, what shall we do? How are we to return? How are we to repent? What shall we do? For behold, the day is coming, burning like a furnace, and all the arrogant and every evildoer will be chaff, and the day is coming, and the day that is coming will set them ablaze, so that it will leave them neither root nor branch. Again, John the Baptist, indeed the axe is already laid at the root of the trees. So every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. His winnowing fork is in his hand to thoroughly clear his threshing floor and to gather the wheat into his barn, but he will burn up the chaff with unquenchable fire. So, like, again, this is, I didn't write the chapter, but this is why, another reason why I love Luke. It's like he records all, like, the necessary facts and details. So, yep, the words of John. So that concludes part 2 of part 2, an open letter to Daniel, Larimer, fuzzy definitions, law of Moses, Sabbath, and Elijah. I hope you're blessed. I hope that hopefully, like, what's it? Hopefully, James, it's like the wisdom from above. The fruit is sown in peace by those who make peace. Hopefully this is packaged and presented in a peaceful way, that it could produce the fruit of righteousness if, in you. If you have blind spots, to maybe call those out. If not, let me know. I'd like to get better at my craft. It's hard to speak the word to people when you don't know them. And all of this is based off of trying to investigate you from blogs and book reviews and endorsements and past interviews, and people are changing all the time. So just because you spoke words at a certain time, well, that doesn't mean your heart's in the same current state. So and if you speak the wrong things, you can really mess things up. So I don't really know you, but I hope that it's presented in a peaceable way, that you can receive the things that God needs you to receive. Okay, thanks. Bye.